All right, today I'm talking with Steve Aylett, and you are my first guest from across the pond. So welcome to whatever this is. And yeah, we were
Right.
talking about the origin of your last name, Aylett. What was
Oh
that?
yeah, no. The only thing I really know about it is, I mean, I don't know if it means anything, but there was a mention of Captain Aylett in Pepys' diary, who was someone's talking about in the war with the Dutch. He's hasn't performed very well. I think there's the suggestion that he turns his ship around and goes in the opposite direction, something like that.
Yeah.
He's maybe a coward, so that's a good thing. And some people say it's in the Doomsday Book or whatever, but so it's kind of an old name, but I've no idea what it means.
Huh. I thought it might be. No, I don't think that. But it sounds like there. You know how there are little British differences in spelling. Like maybe it's how you guys spell eyelid or something. But I think I'm. I don't know where I'm getting that.
Well,
So you,
it's not pronounced that way anyway.
I just want to pronounce it that way. So right now, you mentioned that you broke your leg. How'd that happen?
Oh yeah, yeah. About a month ago, I mean, so I'm just kind of like a bit incapacitated now. About a month ago, I was in Scotland and I was walking between two islands, um,
On the water.
kind of tidal islands. So it was like where at low tide there's a kind of sandbar revealed, so you can walk from one island to another for about an hour and a half each day. It's like when it's low tide. So we were walking along the sand from one island to another, and then the person I was with said, "Oh, let's climb over these rocks. Let's walk over these rocks." And so I followed her, and she was perfectly fine. And I kind of immediately slipped off of one of these rocks because it was kind of slimy with seaweed, and my leg kind of twisted. It's what they call a spiral fracture. So it twisted in a really weird way. It corkscrewed, and I heard it snap. It's like I actually heard it, and so I was lying there in the seaweed, and neither of us had our phones with us, and the tide was coming in, so I would be underwater in about an hour, and I couldn't move.
Did you
So
pass it?
she
Did you pass out?
No, but if I started moving, trying to move my leg, I got to the point where I was almost passing out, and I know how it is to pass out from physical pain because I once had a experience with a doctor who was having some kind of nervous breakdown and decided that he could do some surgery on me without any anesthetic. And as it turned out, he was right. I passed out and rolled off of the operating table and woke up on the floor covered in equipment. Anyway, that's another story. But so I know my limits of pain. So I knew I couldn't move. I couldn't walk on this thing. And the tide was coming in. So she ran to the nearest island and went into someone's cottage and phoned up for the ambulance. And but the land ambulance couldn't get to me. I ended up being airlifted out by a helicopter on a rope. So it was really dramatic. It was like, and I'd been having, and it was a nice time I was having. And quite weirdly enough, the night before, I'd been working on a bit of artwork. In fact, the very last page, the inside back cover of the very last issue of Hyperthick, the comic. And in this bit of artwork, the very last panel, there's a character who's supposed to be me, kind of frolicking through the countryside, and then he trips and falls off a cliff. And so then the next day, this thing happened to me. So I should probably be more careful about what I put in my comics. It's going to come through. I used to know Grant Morrison very slightly. He was another comic creator. I don't know how much you know about comics, but I used to know him a little bit in the 90s when he was doing the Invisibles and all these kinds of things. I lost touch with him when he went to America and started doing Superman and everything. So I haven't seen him for like about 20 years, but he told me about how, you know, you should be careful about what you put in a comic because it could happen, you know, and he always put things in comics that he wanted to happen to him. I mean, he got a girlfriend that way, you know, like there's a character called Ragged Robin in The Invisibles, who's basically turned up in real life for him. But he learned about this by, he had a character called King Mob, who was who had a kind of like weird thing happening to his face, sort of like a weird growth down the side of his face, and then it happened to Grant Morrison in real life, and he was in hospital, you know. So from then on, he was very careful about what he put in his comics, and he told me that I should be careful as well if I ever did, you know, about what I write and that. And I said, oh, don't be so bloody stupid, you know. But anyway, maybe there is some truth in it. And he also said to me, oh, you know, you should write, he's Scottish, so I'm trying to, you should do, you know, you should write some comics, you know, because you only have to write like 5 words, you know, for every page, and you get paid like about $500 or something. Actually, that's more like Mexican or Dutch, that accent. But anyway, I should have taken his advice. But I didn't, so I have no money.
Well, I was thinking about your fiction. It's very, I don't even know how to describe it. It's very, I guess, I mean, I don't want to say fantasy. I want to say fantastical maybe, but like, do you feel with your writing that is this like how you experience the world, or is this like, are you experiencing new places when you write too? Is this like you're creating these lands that are new for you too? And
well, I mean, I always see the ideas and the jokes and sometimes the actual sentences themselves as shapes before I put them down on the page. Like big 3-dimensional shapes kind of rolling through space.
You're a synesthete, right?
Yeah.
Is that, I read that, yeah.
And they're kind of coloured and have textures and bits sticking out of them, which might slot into other shapes. And if they do slot together, then they kind of light up and they're interesting and they sort of vibrate. And that's how I know that it's an interesting idea. And sometimes I actually have the shape of a specific sentence before I know what the words are that are in the sentence, kind of thing. So then I just slot the words down, not necessarily in the order that they're read in. Sometimes like the last word first, and then the middle one, then the first, and then the rest of them. It's increasingly like that now. There isn't so it kind of means that, yeah, it's a strange process.
It sounds a bit like Tetris or something. But
yeah, it can be a little bit like that. There's a thing in that movie Limitless, where that guy takes that drug that makes him very clever, and he sits there at his computer and he's typing, and all these words are kind of dropping down around him. It's a little bit like that, except it has a bit more form than that. But I'm not necessarily very clever, but you know.
So do you feel like you're even like you're almost channeling something that's like coming to you? Like I remember like Philip K. Dick, you know, he supposedly received a lot of that like Valis stuff through.
Yeah, I think that's an interpretation you can put on it, but I just think that there's a lot of ideas that, I mean, I believe in what I call idea space. I believe that there's, you know, if we say, okay, this idea is here and this idea is here, then I can like see what's in between those two ideas and get a whole bunch of other ideas that way. But what's much more interesting is for me to triangulate off of those about 5,000 miles in that direction and see what idea is over there, because there are ideas in idea space somehow. I think you need to learn quite a lot about what ideas already exist in order to set up a bit of a topology. But then you can triangulate away from that into something completely new. And there's just loads of stuff out there, and we only use about like a billionth of a percent of it. It's just like, it's not actually infinite, but it's like if a billion people came up with a billion original ideas every second for a billion years, there'd still be some original ideas left. So it's not actually infinite, but there's plenty. There's more than we'll ever need, and we just don't seem to be bothered about it. We just prefer to make a superhero movie, you know. But I think it's like, if there's someone who is open to this stuff and can kind of get out of the way enough to let it through, these ideas, they want to come through. And like, if they see that there's someone who is actually open to them and is writing them down, it's like they're kind of like, hey, this guy's actually listening. This guy, we can get through. We can get through here. These other guys are writing superhero movies, but this guy, we can get in. We can get through this way. Come through here. So all this stuff comes through because they know that they're welcome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I write the stuff down, and then I sort of arrange it, you know, in a way that I can, more and more I'm sort of putting it into, I mean, I like to use forms that can concentrate as many ideas as possible in the shortest space. And at the moment, comics are, you know, that's the latest good way of doing it for me.
Well, I looked at you sent me the sample of Hyperthick, and I really enjoyed it. It was very funny and very, like you said, very, I think, thick. I actually read it twice, and the second time I found, coincidentally, the last interview I did was discussing Finnegan's Wake, and I think I could almost, I don't know if you want to call it a Finnegan's Wake, a modern Finnegan's Wake or something, but it is very, it's kind of like difficult to put your finger on it, like the way Finnegan's Wake is. It's kind of slippery, and it was a little different the second time, and very poetic, as Alan Moore, his blurb said. So I'm curious though, what is Hyperthick, and how did this come about?
Well, the word hyperthick has just been a word that's been hanging around for a long time for me, that I thought would one day be good to use, you know, as the title of a comic. But the project of the 3 issues of it, and it gets better, by the way, as it goes along. They kind of, it's just when I decided, like about 6 or 7 years ago, to just stop writing, because various stuff happened, and I just kind of like, I just can't, you know, I'm just gonna, various other stuff in my life was kind of collapsing, and I thought, well, if everything's burning down and collapsing, I'm going to throw this on the fire as well, you know, because this isn't really sort of paying great dividends for me at the moment, and so on. And I thought I was done. But then, I don't know, a couple of years ago or something, I made the mistake of, for various reasons, technical reasons, I bought like a little notebook about that big, to carry around with me to write down things, and not creative things. But then I made the mistake of writing down some kind of funny idea one day, and then that was it. I was done for, you know, and I was back sort of filling up thick notebooks like that, sort of virtually every day, with loads and loads of stuff. Most of it pretty good. and better than the stuff that I've done before. I mean, I think I've got a fairly high opinion of my own writing before, but this is way better. I think it's just, and I don't know why. It may be something to do with having put my foot down and kind of said, I'm not going to, I mean, in a way, it got to the point where the writing was kind of like some kind of, like the way that people who are addicted to something really heavy like heroin or something, they can go through life, but what they're really thinking about all the time is where their next fix is coming from. That's how it got for me with writing a few years ago.
But before you quit, or after you restarted? Oh, I see.
Yeah, before I quit. Yeah, and it was just like everything, just including being with people and relationships and stuff like that. It would all be like, well, how can I put this? How does this feed the writing? And I just did, and it felt unhealthy, like the tail wagging the dog kind of thing. So that was one of the reasons why I stopped. But since I started again, it's been much more healthy than that. And it's been like, okay, an idea just occurred to me, but I don't have to stop everything to write it down, and I'll either remember it or forget it. And I've probably lost a whole bunch of ideas that way, but it's kind of a more sane, more kind of human scale way of living. And also, just for some odd reason that I still haven't really worked out, the material is way, way better.
But the format itself, though, is pretty unique. If I'm understanding it correctly, you're basically using is like older comics and kind of re-dialoguing them.
Kind of like out of copyright, kind of mainly 1930s obscure comics, and sort of putting them through dozens of filters and repainting things and making a collage.
And how does that affect like your ideas of where the story is going? Because you obviously have some limitations to.
Well, it's kind of like the writing exists first, and the writing is very, very easy, and it just comes through really easily. The artwork takes absolutely ages because I have backed myself into this weird corner of doing it in this weird way. It would be way easier if I just got an illustrator.
Are you editing the artwork yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing everything. And but I wonder about this thing of like just doing it normally, because there are certain things that are suggested by the artwork, and also certain like a character kind of saying a thing almost expressionless, in some while and sitting in some archaic office with the shadows falling just so, can be really, really funny. Whereas if I wrote that dialogue and then described the scene and got an illustrator to do it, it wouldn't necessarily work quite so well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Actually, I was talking with the artist Benjamin Marra, and he was talking about how in his comics sometimes you kind of have these two things going on at once: the language, the words, and the images. And they, in some of his comics, he has like them so redundant that it's ridiculous. But with your comic, the sample that I read, it was sometimes it was so out of sync that it was just, I laughed out loud, and I liked it a lot. I do want to read the rest. So
yeah, I mean the characters are. I've always been really into. Have you read Lint?
no, I was watching the video on YouTube of the Lint documentary.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that was kind of where I started getting into the comic thing, because I mentioned in that Jeff Lint supposedly did this comic called The Caterer. And then when that book came out, some people actually believed that it was all real and that Jeff Lint existed, and they were saying, where can I get his books? Where can I get copies of The Caterer at the very least? And mainly from American people, actually, strangely enough. But
We're easily fooled.
I didn't want to say it, but it's kind of like, anyway, I ended up actually just giving in, and I made an issue of The Caterer, which I've got a copy of here. And so it's like, it actually exists, and that's where it started. But I've got a lot better at it, I think, over the years, and with Hyperthick, I'm really pleased with it, and I'm mainly pleased, to be honest, with the writing, because the writing has got to a really good point. But the characters, it kind of, this thing of using these kind of old images and there being a slight misalignment to things is useful to me, because I mean, I'm really into writing about kind of trickster characters. Because if you like the trickster archetype, I mean, if you heard about the various character archetypes, the hero and the whatever, there's various ones. And the trickster is really the only one that isn't kind of on rails and that isn't kind of following a story like Pat all the way through. And the only one that seems to me to be like an actual individual who is in complete control of what they're doing and deciding what they're doing. And so I really, even if what they're doing can come across as like really like, why are they doing this? I really like that stuff because it's funny, and it's also kind of it gives credit to the reader's intelligence, because you can't predict absolutely everything. I mean, so many books and comics and films, they're just like, they could almost be written by a program, by a computer, and because this character does this, then this other character reacts this way, and then this happens, and they like, it's like you can see how billiard balls will, or pool balls will like bounce off of each other, and what will happen with them. It's like that. Well, what if this character doesn't react that way? What if this character here does something, and then this character here does something completely different?
Yeah. They talk about like these programs, software, and computers that can write in the style of Mozart, or write beat somebody at Go or chess or whatever, but I'm going to be really impressed, not when they can do something in this style, but when they can like create a new game or a new style or a new genre. I'm less impressed by just being able to match what's been done before. So I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think I've got to the point with Hyperthick where all of the characters are basically tricksters in one way or another, and they're just kind of, so there isn't a straight man, there isn't like a funny man and a straight man. They're trading off, and they're swapping that, so it's a bit more of a dance. But they're all strange and interesting in some way. They're all kind of like inventing themselves from the ground up, and that makes it much more interesting to me to get to. And also the female characters as well. I mean, I always had a thing. I think I had a thing in the past where I would always try and bump up the male characters and make them really weird, add a lot of weirdness to them, because I found men in real life very bland and boring, almost to the point where I couldn't see them. I almost didn't perceive men, whereas women are very vivid and colourful and everything. And so my thinking was, I'll put the women characters in, and then that's all I have to do. I don't have to like add anything. That'll be enough. But of course, that doesn't really work. I mean, anyone coming to it cold will see that the women characters are very underwritten, and the male characters are jumping around doing all kinds of stuff. So I've corrected that now, I think. In real life, I'm giving men a little bit more of a look in, and listening to whether they have anything interesting to say, which, to be honest, hasn't paid off at all yet. I'm still hopeful. And in the writing, I'm not just leaving the female characters alone. I'm bumping them up too, so that everyone is jumping around doing interesting stuff. So everyone is a trickster character now, and there isn't a kind of like a, like in sitcoms, very often there's the wife character who's standing there going, "Oh, you, what are you guys doing? You're always getting up to mischief," that kind of thing, which is just really boring. And I think I kind of fell into that trap a little bit.
Huh. I'm curious how, because I feel like with your prose, like young people might find it, I don't know, difficult or just overwhelming. But I'm curious how children would respond to Hyperthick or your writing in general. Have you shown the sample to any children?
Not yet, although there's some of the stuff I've done before. People give them to their kids and they seem to like it. It's just kind of, I mean, they don't really, to be honest, they don't really bat an eyelid. It just seems, yeah, okay, like it seems pretty straightforward to them. So maybe it's like, maybe it's something like that there. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think there's also a kind of an innocence and an honesty to it, I hope, where there'll be characters who just say exactly what they think in certain situations, and I find that kind of thing interesting. I'm just trying to think of how this goes. I like the thing of characters, even the most stupid characters, being really, really conscious. I'm not very good at writing idiots because I always end up having them saying things that makes it very obvious that they're very conscious and very kind of, so all the characters are really hyper aware of themselves and just say it out loud. So the politicians just lay out completely barefaced exactly what their strategy is, during a speech, in terms of like, okay, I'm going to fool you by doing this, then doing that, and so on, like this. And everyone is just like completely upfront with absolutely everything. And maybe kids like that, I don't know.
I was also thinking about because you're using these old image, like if you look at old comics or just old movies in general, like how people talked in the past. I was thinking about, I don't know if you've seen like interviews with like Andy Warhol or Bob Dylan in the 60s, when the reporters are just like, they treat them almost like they're aliens, and you watch the press conferences now and the questions are just so ridiculous and the way that they treat, I mean, they're just, but now like you look at them and Bob Dylan and Andy Warhol just seem like they were kind of aware of how ridiculous their world was. So I feel like you're updating these characters with their their inane situations and bringing it into, like you said, a more hyper aware kind of consciousness.
Yeah, and they're also they're also all just really killer. Even the kind of thugs or whatever, these kind of old kind of gangster type. They're just like hyper articulate with what they're saying, and just I just really like that. It just heightens everything. It saves a lot of time. It's less insulting for the reader because it's like, okay, get that out of the way and move on, And yeah, I like that kind of stuff. Um, part of it may come from a kind of I have a bit of an Asperger's thing going on. I was diagnosed about 10 years ago with Asperger's, and it's kind of like, well, I didn't really make a big noise about it because shortly after I was diagnosed, it became kind of very fashionable to kind of come out as an Aspie, and I don't like kind of that thing of becoming accidentally fashionable. So I didn't say it, but now that fashion has passed, so I don't mind talking about it. But there's a thing of like that whole thing of someone saying one thing and then doing something else, or saying the opposite of what they mean, and all this kind of stuff, which I've had to work out really laboriously over the years. I still don't approve of it, but I understand and recognize that that's what people do. I think probably some of that comes into the characters as well, and that the trickster characters are just like a complete challenge to that. It's like the trickster characters my characters are the only ones that don't have a script. Everyone else is working to some kind of script, and these characters just sort of like, they're free. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's good. That's interesting for comedy, and it's interesting for philosophy, and it's good for ideas. You can have like all kinds of stuff happening.
Well, I found it very refreshing. Just, I think the ease with which people can make media available nowadays in whatever format, but like whatever not alternate, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like thinking styles, like you said, synesthesia and your Asperger's, like they allow you to do and show things and have different perspectives that, Nabokov was supposedly a synesthete too, and some of his books are just amazing, and they just seem to come from a different place. So I enjoyed Hyperthick a lot. So I'm glad that you are still writing.
Yeah, I mean, it gets better and better, Hyperthick. Though I say so myself, I'm always a bit without, no one's going to watch this. It doesn't matter.
Too true.
It's like, no, I mean, yeah, sorry, but it's like, yeah, I'm just really pleased with it. It's nice. It's good that there's stuff. I mean, there's some books that I've written. I mean, a lot of them I still really like. I mean, Lint and part of the original, and Rebel at the End of Time, and some other things I just really like. But there's a few things, like kind of there's a book called Toxicology, which is a collection of short stories, and about half the stories in there are kind of crap, I think, at this point. And it's just really nice to do something that is completely rich and doesn't have any filler in it at all, and is kind of like what I describe Jeff Lint's writing as being like, where every sentence is coming directly at you all the time. Everything's coming directly at you all the time. And that's not for everyone. Some people find it exhausting, and some people find it irritating, and some people think, oh, it's trying too hard or something like that. Or they just don't get it because of a different sense of humor or something like that. But some people, I love it. I mean, I write the kind of stuff that I want to read, and I love that stuff. It's just like gold. It's like ambrosia to me. It's like, it's like gold dust. And Yeah, I'm really pleased with Hyperthick. Well, you can tell that I am. I mean, going on about it.
Well, I'm excited to read it
Um,
all. And when will it be available? July?
the first one's out in July, and then the second one, for some reason, is like a couple of months after that, and then the third one is a couple of months after that. So I think they'll all be out by the end of the year. Yeah.
Nice.
Um,
And where can
but
people
it's from.
where can people get that?
Um, well, there's a lot of comic shops that have ordered it in. Forbidden Planet and a bunch of other comic shops. And it's actually published by Floating World Comics in Portland. But they've had a lot of orders, a lot of pre-orders apparently. So it's going to be out there.
Okay,
Yeah.
so bug your
And
comic shop.
if all else fails, you can get it from Floating World, directly.
Nice.
Um,
Cool. Well,
yeah. Is there anything else you want to?
I think
I've got a lot of great anecdotes. I mean, is there anything else you want to know?
let me think. So I guess I'm kind of curious if you don't mind. Like I'm curious about your writing like routines. Like what is like how often do you write and how long do you write for? Like is that
Um, I don't have a writing routine. I only write stuff when ideas come along. So I'm writing down little notes and stuff all the time, but I don't sit down like from okay, I'm going to start at 9 o'clock in the morning and go until 3 in the afternoon or something like that. I don't do that. I think a lot of really crappy books get written that way when people are sitting down to write things when they don't actually have anything to write. So I write stuff down when I've got an idea. So I fill notebooks up with ideas, and then later on I form it into some kind of form. That's how I'm doing it these days.
and your ideas?
In the past, I used to
uh,
carry on.
I was just going to ask about your ideas in general. Do they are they like usually thinking about something like I don't know, and then an idea comes related to that, or is it usually just out of the blue? Some
Just stuff just falls in, you know, and I don't get in the way of it. I think um, sometimes I'm thinking about a specific thing. Sometimes something out in the world will trigger it, but sometimes I'll always know when there's a word. I mean, words also have a shape. They have a physical shape with often with bits sticking out of them. A bit like a molecule with things sticking out, and those things sticking out will be begging to connect to something. Words. Some words really want to be attached to other words, but not necessarily the words that you would genuinely expect. And some words were just made to go together, but no one's ever put them together before. And when you do, it just releases a huge amount of energy. It's amazing. But sometimes there'll be something out in the world that will trigger something. Like when I was a few days before I smashed my leg in, I was looking at these coastal areas of Scotland, the kind of like jigsaw edges of these islands. And I was thinking about kind of like the, sort of continental drift, the way people talk about how scientists talk about how at one point there was a huge, great continent. I forget what they call it now, Pangaea, I think they call it. But then at some point it kind of broke in the middle and drifted apart. And so the two or three main continents that we have, if you look at them closely, they actually fit into each other. You know what I mean? Like jigsaw pieces. And I just thought, well, what if one continent is one philosophy and another continent is another philosophy or opinion, but they fit perfectly together? And I was thinking, well, how can I put that into a sentence? But then I abandoned the continental drift thing and just went with jigsaw. And so there are two characters, two little kids actually saying, and one of them says, the edge of my opinion fits perfectly into the edge of yours, like a jigsaw piece, don't you want to see the whole picture? You know, the whole jigsaw. So that's it. So it's like only like about a sentence and a half, and it only took like about 30 seconds. It's not as complicated as it sounds, but it's a nice idea, you know, and I'm hoping that I expressed it well enough.
Yeah, I like hearing about that process. What about you talked about Grant Morrison and the idea that what you write is, can have magical influence on your own life. So are you going to be more careful now about what you write, or are you going to?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not. I'm just not so sure about that, and I'm just um, fairly. Well, I'm kind of blowing my own trumpet really a bit at the moment, but I'm generally kind of like actually sort of fairly self-effacing. I know that I'm an obscure writer. I know that I will never be famous during my lifetime, and that although that's actually really nice because it means I can do whatever the hell I want, you know, uh, and I don't have to second guess stuff. But I think I'm kind of like the fly in my own ointment. I think, and only when I'm dead and out of the way, it can all be repackaged, represented to the public, and be a big thing. But not 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 until then. So I used to actually, when I was younger, I actually had a thing about I want to be some big famous writer or famous in some way. But and I'd like to claim that I've passed that by becoming kind of spiritually elevated or something like that. But it isn't that. It's just that I realized it's just really never going to happen. Not in a million years. Not what, you know. It's just not going to happen during my lifetime. It never will. Why did I ever think that it would? But
I don't. No, you can't. Well, I mean, I think it may be kind of good to have that attitude because like you said, it gives you a freedom to not care and do the work you love. But
yeah,
I hope there's some part of your mind that at least maybe there'll be a Steve Aylett explosion of like somebody will be reading your book in a movie or something, and it'll just trigger a huge avalanche
I'm
of
not.
readers.
I'm not really holding my breath about that. I mean, like every now and again, like every couple of years or something, some filmmaker comes along and says, "I want to make a film of one of your books or whatever," you know, and it just never comes to anything. I mean, the first time it happened was with Slaughtermatic and that guy Joe Esterhausen, who did Fatal Attraction and all those things. He read an early review of it or something. It might have even been before it came out. And he got in touch with the publisher, asked for the manuscript because he thought it was like a kind of straightforward heist thing, like Dog Day Afternoon or something like that. He got the manuscript and everything just went silent, you know, because there's all this stuff happening in it. And I've got really used to that silence over the years. I can recognize it. And oh yeah, and then Joe Esterhausen went off and did Showgirls, I think. So you're welcome. But it's like, oh man, these things happen a lot. Like a couple of years ago, a company that was the actor Sadie Frost, her company wanted to do a film of Bigot Hall, which is a really early book of mine, and which is probably a good idea. It probably actually is filmable and would be really interesting. And then they kind of wasted my time for about 6 months, and then everything went quiet, and there was that very particular quality of silence again. And only about 3 or 4 months ago, this big, I can't remember the name of them now, but this big representation agency got in touch with me from Hollywood and said, we've got this A-list director who wants to was interested in making a movie of Lint, and who owns the rights? I said, well, I still got the rights, to it. And then nothing more. And I never found out who the director was, but they had, these big, they had Tim Burton and all these big characters. So it just, I don't really rise to it anymore. And this idea of kind of like putting big success things in my comics, to go back to your question, that thing of like putting big success things in my comics in order to sort of, for that to somehow manifest in my life. I don't know. I think I've got more of a sense of humor than that, and a kind of like maybe a sort of English self-deprecating thing or something. I don't know what it is, but it seems, I don't know. I mean, how would it be funny? If there were characters, if I did a comic or a book about a character about some entrepreneur who had an idea to do a thing, and then he did it, and then it was a big success, and he got lots of money, and sitting on a yacht or something. What's that? Why is that interesting? How is that interesting? It wouldn't keep me interested enough to be able to actually stay the course and write the thing. I would almost immediately have just things going off at angles and interesting stuff happening, to keep myself amused. So, there it is.
Well, I will admit that your writing is, I would say, challenging in the sense that, like, when I first encountered it, I read it, and it's very thick, and like I can compare it to maybe like William Burroughs in the sense that initially I didn't care for his writing, but later I came back to it and I enjoyed it a lot more. So I think I had the same experience with your writing, and I would say Hyperthick is one of the best ways to start with your writing, because you do have that. It's kind of grounded in like the illustrations, but then you have that counter flow of the words. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like Burroughs initially either. People always assume that I love him, but I like recordings of him reading his stuff, performing it. That's what I like about him. Although he was one of the people. Have you heard about the Aylett curse?
No, what is that?
It's a thing that's happened several times, where when I've sent someone just out of the blue, cold, when I've sent someone a copy of one of my books, people that I don't know, famous people, they die. So the first one was a guy called Ronnie Cray, who was a famous gangster here in England, one of the Cray twins. I happened to know his lawyer, and I gave him the manuscript of The Crime Studio, which is my first book. It's kind of juvenilia, really. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I'll give it to Ronnie Cray." So he went into prison, because Ron Cray was in prison, and gave him the manuscript. And then, like about a month later, he was dead. I didn't think anything of it.
It might be a good idea if we wrap up. I don't want to torture people with that connection, but
yeah.
So
anyway, so I mean, I've kind of relied on Alan Moore for the last few years to provide, nice remarks for the covers of my books. But like, I really abuse his friendship actually, and just like constantly get him to. But he's immune to the curse, because I know him. I we're friends, so the curse doesn't apply to him. He just, he just goes on.
No, actually the call seems better now. So yeah, but it sounded like you were saying Harry Harrison and Kurt Vonnegut, though. You is that who you said? It was kind of breaking up at that point.
Oh yeah. So Ronnie Cray, William Burroughs, Harry Harrison, and the final one was Kurt Vonnegut. Yeah, they all died upon receiving books.
Have you thought about sending it to like somebody you don't like?
It would be a good idea. I mean, I sort of felt bad after Vonnegut because that's the one that I really regret, you know. Yeah, it might be an idea, mightn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a thought, but
Yeah.
I think right now though, like I hope people check out Hyperthick. I'm gonna check it out. I think it'll be the best thing I've read by you because I enjoyed the preview a lot. And I appreciate it a lot, and I appreciate you coming on to talk about it. Yeah.